What's up, guys? It's a aspiring psychiatrist here. I hope you guys are having a great day today. I actually am really looking forward to this video. I think it's going to be really fun to do this, and I hope you guys have a interesting experience. So today's video is going to be on dating and romance in this modern age. There's a lot of statistics that I'm going to be covering just from instant Google results here, and I think I hope you guys really enjoy it, and I hope that you guys, you know, just have a good time and that you're entertained by my observations. So, so a significant majority of modern relationships, often cited as over 50%, and potentially reaching 60% or more for newer couples, start online, with studies showing online dating has become more dominant. So, this is just so fascinating, isn't it? Because it's indicative of how the modern age has changed the social and cultural landscape, right? When I was a kid, I remember when I was young, I would sit there and be playing video games and be using a controller and all that. And it would be me and some fellows on Modern Warfare 2 or Halo Reach, and we'd be joking around, or League of Legends, or whatever the new game is. And we all were like, oh, like, there's no way that we're talking over the internet right now, and there's no way that, um, we're having these interactions. It's so amazing. It's so fascinating. It's so, I guess you could say, magical. And then we would say horribly racist things to each other. We would say awfully racist things, crude things, insensitive things. It was bad. It was not good. People would come home from work, okay, and they would sit there and just hear some kid calling them the N word or some racist term on on Modern Warfare 2. And you don't know how to deal with this at first, right? The older generation are just like, what is going on here? Is this just, this is so stupid. And so the idea of that translating to so many people, you know, having these online relationships in this modern age, it's a very subtle and difficult transition, isn't it? It's strange for some of us older folk, I guess. I'm 26 now. So this next one is really tough to take in. This is that 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce, right? And at first it's like, this is existentially very painful to take in. It's like, why is this so? Why am I sitting here even having to process this, right? It's so awful. The idea that two people would come together, form an intimate union and a matrimony, and then have that be completely broken and shattered 50% of the time. But I think it's this is the kind of beginning of, I think, a deeper ability to discern human nature, right? It's that loyalty is, I don't think, inherent to human nature. I think loyalty is conditioned into human nature by sociocultural phenomenon, or by, I guess you could say, if people don't like those terms, I guess you could say, what's the best way to put it? Religion, in many ways, is a psycho-emotional phenomenon. Religion is a psycho-emotional mechanism in the mind. The Jungian line of thinking is actually very compelling. And so it's tough because people, they need to be shown the path to be able to have loyalty and fidelity. I don't think it's inherent to human nature. One can disagree if they would like to. So at that point, we wonder, what is the average age of marriage, right? And so this to me actually was quite existentially relieving because I felt more normal. The average age of marriage for men and women is anywhere from 30 years to about 28 years, right? And so it's strange. It's tough because I think when I was in high school, I'd have a lot of friends who would sit there and they would be in these early marriages, and they had very rich families and wealthy families. And I would feel kind of insecure. I would be like, why is it that I'm not like that? Why am I not having this early kind of marriage with all this, symbolic gratification and fulfillment in my career? But then I realized that a lot of people out here are similar in that it's different for different people. Some people will meet their high school sweetheart. Some people will, sit there and meet them in college. Some people later in life. It just depends on the individual. But the average overall on a bell curve like distribution is 30 years old for men and 28 years old for women. And it's okay. And people are different. And there's different societal expectations and standards that are inherently imposed on men and women. And we can talk about those more in the future if anyone would like that. So what percentage of marriages start online? So studies show that nearly 50 to 60% of marriages start online. So this is very shocking, isn't it? Because it shows that the consecutive generations since I was a young kid, right? When I was a young kid, you're sitting there, you're playing Xbox 360, and you're like, you know what? This is just a stupid kid game thing. We're all going to say the most mean and racist and rude things to each other just because we feel like it. We're bored, and it's funny to us. It's funny in this very crude, juvenile way, right? And that was the beginning of any kind of verbal communication on the internet for a lot of young guys, right? When we first created these mechanisms, I think, we didn't really sit there and explain to a lot of kids the differences between this is the social media world, this is the phone contact world, this is the, I guess you could say, YouTube world, right? There's like different kinds of spheres and almost kind of biomes, almost in like an ecology that interconnect to one another. It's like the internet is this kind of digital forest, which is an extension of real life, where there's these weird interconnections between the forest in this sense, right? It's very strange. If you cause controversy on Reddit, maybe it'll reciprocate to YouTube. If you cause controversy on YouTube, maybe it'll reciprocate to Reddit. Those kinds of dynamics developed quite quickly, and so people bought into it, regardless of what the old generation thinks. People bought into the idea that the internet is a valid way of communication and sustaining human life. So what's so fascinating to me is the whole home price thing. I think a lot of this leads to some social and cultural tension. I think a lot of this leads to some feelings of anger and disappointment with the young people. In my personal opinion, the increase in home value actually has, in some ways, been beneficial, paradoxically, for people who are not looking to purchase, because rental prices have gone down drastically. Rental prices have gone down dynamically, and it's even been a chaotic market because of it. I saw at times there be rooms that would be priced similar to full homes, depending on the area and if you're willing to compromise. Or there would be entire apartments priced similarly to rooms. And so the home market stopped being about the ramblings of an old man, but the home market stopped being about owning the vessel of your living and started becoming more about maintaining that connection as a business. We became more business oriented culturally in the foundation of our society, because we have a contractual business obligation foundationally that leads to our family's living circumstance. And so if you're into investment, the home market is a wonderful place long term. But aside from that, renting, it provides the same utility. I don't think it's wise to sit there and to buy a property unless you're willing to set your feet down for at least 10 years to 20 years. It's just not, that's not the way it works anymore. So this next one is a very, I would say, difficult statistic to take in. And I don't like to be overly controversial in the statistics I'm selecting. I just find these to be incredibly fascinating and incredibly wonderful as insight emblematically into human nature, be it male or female. So studies have shown that on paternity test, roughly 10 to 30% of the time, cases result in the exclusion of the alleged father, right? With an average of 26.9 being the case. What's so strange to me is I don't personally like to use this very harsh statistic as for insight into the nature of men or women inherently being disgusting or evil or awful in any way. I think as human beings, everyone struggles with temptation and pleasure. That's a day-to-day decision, right? It's hard in the day-to-day. We have, healthy options, unhealthy options, positive health decisions, negative health decisions. That's on a day-to-day basis. And so the same goes for the health of family structures, the health of our physical bodies, the health of our, inner emotional worlds, right? It's very fascinating and sad that this statistic is the case, but at the same time, this should not be used to. I see this often. This should not be used to shame women, and this should not be used to humiliate men as being cuckolds in some way. It is a collective, emblematic sign of human nature. That's what it is. And the honest truth is that I think it's sad. Women are not these disgusting, promiscuous, awful beings, and men are not these awful, disgusting, promiscuous beings either. What it is human nature overall struggles with loyalty and fidelity. It contends with it, in essence. And the people who go back and forth between blaming boys and girls, it's a low-level media narrative that is used to sustain and to entertain the masses, which you just mature past it as you get older. What I find so fascinating to me is that, on average, 25-year-olds will spend 3 hours and 18 minutes on social media. That is so strange to me. That is so strange to me. Because to me, I don't understand, if you have a phone, right, and if it's a mechanism of your daily life, what does it have? It has the apps that you select. It has the business utilities that you want. The phone has, the contacts that you keep on it, right? And so it's a little world emotionally that is like a mirror. A phone is like a mirror. It reflects back at you. It echoes itself back to you, in a sense, right? And if you think of it physically as a structure, it's a glass screen with a camera you can reverse to look at yourself. And so this is emblematic of how our culture is inherently narcissistic, right? People will talk about narcissistic personality disorder. People will talk about borderline personality disorder. They'll talk about alters, right? Alters, on VR chat. If you look up the YouTube channel Proximity Chat, there's people who are doing these alters, right, where they revert into their inner child and kind of have this like tantrum or like coddling with other people in these spaces. And that is the logical consistency of living one's entire life on the internet, I think. It's so strange, isn't it? You know, why are these VR chatters sitting there and having these existential and emotional uh, man and woman tantrums where they're being coddled by another VR chat user and they're being held in the VR chat user's arms? Why is that? It's so strange to me. I guess it's because real life is not as comforting to our inner child as a lot of people want it to be. So, what's so fascinating to me, I think, is this women's divorce rate. I pulled this from Google Images. All these come from Google. It's always the first thing that I find. It's really not that challenging to find these. You can reverse image search them, and it wouldn't be that challenging to find them. What's so fascinating to me is, in the very end, it's not women's fault that the divorce rate is like this. That to me is emblematic of a societal scapegoat. And as well, I find it so fascinating that regardless of it be a man or woman, this is bad. This is a bad sign. The juice is not worth the squeeze anymore. I guess you could say, effort is not worth the return anymore with dating. We become more business oriented as a culture. That's what has occurred in a professional sense. It's sad. It's sad. Um, it's unfortunate. This is kind of where we are now. So, I'm also going to extrapolate this very quickly. I grew up in a little town in Georgia called Atlanta. I grew up homeless in East Side Atlanta. When I joined the military, I then moved to a place called Maryland, and I worked at the capital of or not at the capital, that's a delusion of grandeur. I, I worked at near the White House. I worked about 15 to 10 minutes away from the White House, and by train when I was doing my military service. I loved it. It was the most magical and amazing part of my entire life. It was in some ways traumatic. It was in some ways definitely, it gave me a window into the coming political and cultural events that would transpire, because it's if the corporate hive mind is nested in California, right, and their kind of information spreads from here, I guess you could say, government hive mind authority and information spreads from here, right? And so it's strange because Texas, is in this center, and it's incredibly fascinating to see that we have a cultural kind of tension between, I guess you could say, the corporate entities and the government kind of entities. And this is consolidated by our Republican and Democratic Party. I'm not politically affiliated, and I don't find politics that interesting. I study it sometimes, but what I find very fascinating is it's moving from Georgia, living in Maryland, living in North Carolina, and then finally making my way to Texas to find a more hospitable dating environment. It was very interesting because I was like, oh, there's too many old people up here. Right? There's too many old people up here. So, and I don't hate them. I loved all the old people I would hang out with at churches. So I said, I'm gonna freshen up a little bit, right? I grew up in Atlanta. I knew Georgia pretty well. I'm gonna dip to Texas because people like Joe Rogan or other cultural symbols there. And what ended up hitting me, and happen, man or woman, is always subject to the temptations of the flesh, right? And we can discuss epistemology, conceptions of knowledge, ontology, conceptions of being and self, and these big fancy words and the hoo-ha, right? But at the end, human nature is subject to temptation, and that is a truth that took me a long time to accept. it took me a long time to accept that because it's so sad. It's so indicative of the human condition in a deep way.